On September 8th, 2024, Mojang officially announced the end of the controversial mob vote. The community celebrated, before realizing they wouldn't have anything to complain about this year. It really was quite sad, though. A transparent and direct way for the community to add new features should have been a slam dunk. But in this video, we'll go over the history of the mob vote and how it was probably doomed from the start. The origin of the mob vote goes back to 2016. Jeez, has it really been 8 years? Anyways, for the exploration update, Jeb, the lead developer of Minecraft, wanted to add alpacas. Several Mojang employees insisted he added llamas instead. What's the difference between these two? No one actually knows, but Jeb decided to leave it up to the community and hosted a Twitter poll. The llama went on to win by 3,500 votes. And they are certainly a mob of time. Regardless, players seem to enjoy having a say in the development process, and thus the first official mob vote was held during Minecon 2017. This time, the concept for 4 vastly different mobs were showcased. The Barnacle, a nightmare-fuel aquatic creature that could snatch your feet and drag you down to the ocean floor. The Phantom, a flying mob that terrorized players who couldn't find rest. The Great Hunger, a pretty ugly creature that behaves kinda like a chest mimic, stealing items from your hotbar. And finally, the Wildfire, a mini-boss variant of the Blaze, mechanically similar to Brute Piglins. 3 consecutive votes were held on Twitter, with the Phantom winning the final poll with 52% against the Great Hunger's 48%. My script says to insert a joke about phantoms, but what can I say that hasn't already been said 1,000 times? These guys suck and punish players for not playing a specific way, and don't even drop anything worth all the trouble. But before you go and make fun of the community for picking such a terrible mob, don't worry, we'll do that later. There was a critical issue with Mojang's methodology. Only 2,000 people participated in the final poll. While that might sound like a lot, keep in mind future mob votes consistently had hundreds of thousands or even millions of votes. Even that impromptu poll from 2016 had 10 times as many votes. This is a minuscule sample size, likely not representing the entire Minecraft community at all. 1,159 people chose the Phantom. When you consider this was hosted on Twitter, even just a single troll could have used a few bots to rig the election in their favor. If this mob vote had gotten the same level of attention as later polls would, I'd have to say the Wildfire or Barnacle would have won. They were arguably the coolest in concept, and their respective biomes were heavily neglected at the time. For the next 2 years, Mojang opted to do biome votes instead. Perhaps they saw 2017 as a misstep, or just wanted to try something different. These were some of the best we got. More than just a single mob was on the table, and the developers claimed that the losing biomes would still be updated at a later point. That never happened, but regardless, taigas won against savannas and deserts in 2018, giving us campfires, sweet berries, and the best mob ever.
我在北京。
9月7日至9月20日，欢迎大家投票选出你们最喜爱的国宝。投票结果将于9月21日公布，而最终加入游戏的国宝将于9月30日在 Minecon 揭晓。让我们一起拭目以待中国玩家票选的国宝能否成功入驻游戏，与玩家们亲密接触吧。每人每天可投2票，可为同一个国宝投票。
Minecraft China got its own unique mob vote this year, with Chinese players having the choice to pick between the panda, alligator, monkey, deer, and river dolphin. I'm not really sure the organizers of the vote understood how democracy works, because either this is a severe translation error, or users could vote multiple times. Turnout was quite low, with only around 0.1% of the Chinese player base participating. Regardless, you can probably guess the Great Panda won in a landslide that I'm sure was a very free and fair election. In 2019, mountains beat out the Badlands and swamps, which ended up as the cliffs part of caves and cliffs. Personally, this was one of the community's best decisions out of all the votes. I've talked pretty extensively about how much I like the new generation, but these massive Alps just look pretty and are fun to explore in survival. Unfortunately, any goodwill the community had towards these polls would be permanently shattered by one of the most divisive controversies in Minecraft history. By the way, be sure to like the video if you're enjoying it so far. I'm also going to tell YouTube to put an ad here because it's the end of the chapter, so I might suddenly get...
You might already know of Grammarly, but have you heard of their new
While 2020 might not have been the best year for most, it was quite great for Mojang. The lockdown led to a huge influx of active players, YouTube was dominated by Minecraft content creators, and 1.16 was praised for the massive update to the Nether, which until then was practically pointless. While some complained about the pigmen getting floppy ears and others taking issue to the squishy netherrack, their opinions are invalid. During the build-up to this year's Minecraft Live, Mojang announced the return of the mob vote. Players would get to choose between a yellow cow that did nothing, a glowing squid that did nothing, and the Aslerix, a hostile mob that spawned on mountain peaks that could shoot chunks of ice at you. There was a ton of hype for this guy, and an expectation he'd win formed. You probably know what happens next. Moments before the vote went underway, Dream, that YouTuber who got called a British cigarette by Gumball Watterson, told his massive following of impressionable children to vote for the glow squid, helping it win by nearly 6 points in the final round. People were mildly upset.
Why did a retextured squid that doesn't truly glow win?
Well, it's because of Twitter. It's no secret that Dream has one of, if not the most toxic fanbase.
Glow squids were implemented in 1.17. They don't really do anything besides fall into caves and die. But admittedly, I did vote for them because colored signs were way more appealing to me than being knocked off mountains by yet another mob. Isolagers did feature in Minecraft dungeons. To be honest, they're kind of annoying. So maybe it's best we didn't get them in the original game. 2021 saw yet another mob vote, and players got to choose between the Glare, which was only notable for being unnotable, the Alley, which acted as a nice version of the Vex, and the Copper Golem, which was pretty cool. There were some potential redstone applications, and it'd be nice to have a third golem in the game. Alas, the Alley won by a decent margin. No clue what these things actually do, but people seem to like them, so I ain't no hater. This was the first and only vote I got wrong. While disappointing, it led me to a realization that'll become prudent later. A year passes by, and you know the drill at this point. 2022 felt like the most rigged one, in the sense that Mojang had a clear favorite. The sniffer perfectly fit the theme of trails and tales. Not to mention the other options were just desaturated versions of the previous losers. The sniffer beat out the Rascal and Tough Golem by 27%. I still haven't actually seen one in game. 2023. I'm not sure if I actually watched Minecraft Live this year. 3 new mobs entered the scene, and many considered it to be the best roster yet. Armadillos would spawn in savannas and drop scute while shedding. This could then be farmed and used to create armor for wolves, who'd get their own much needed revamp. Crabs would spawn in mangroves, meaning you'd have to travel across the entire observable universe to find one. Their claws could be obtained, increasing the player's maximum reach. There were also penguins, which had nearly the same functionality as dolphins, so no one cared about them. You can't deny how cute they are, though. The armadillo was the only mob to win by a plurality, meaning it got less than 50% of the vote, and there wasn't a second poll. While it still won by 10%, some players absolutely lost their minds. A flame war burst out across the entire Minecraft community, arguments raged on Discord, Redditors claimed election fraud, and Twitter even tried leading an insurrection against Mojang. It was at this point, seeing users make propaganda posters and screaming because they didn't get a crab arm, I came to a revelation. This was cringe. While 2023 might have been the straw that broke the camel's back, I think there are a plethora of reasons why the mob vote was ultimately canned. But I've boiled it down to 3 main arguments. Number 1, an incredibly flawed voting system. 2, divergent expectations between developers and players. And 3, simply just terrible timing. Okay, so first off, the way these votes were handled sucked. Can you think of a worse place to hold an election than Twitter? Mojang tried to fix this by moving the poll off the platform near the end of its life, but that was too little too late and wasn't the only issue. The multiple rounds of voting was confusing, and since you couldn't vote in order of preference, those who ended up in 3rd place just dipped out after the first round. All this really means is that whoever edged the lead was guaranteed to win. Next up, remember that realization I mentioned earlier? I kinda get the feeling the mob vote was meant primarily towards, let's say the average Minecraft player. Now, this was Mojang's mistake for hosting it on Twitter, but some of y'all really did get too tilted over something that can just be added as a mod. Yeah, I hate using that argument. But if you really care that much about a cold pillager or a land dolphin, there's a mod for every single mob that's lost. There seemed to be a disconnect between Mojang viewing it as a low-stakes event for casual players to choose a mostly aesthetic mob, while those who engaged with it most took the whole thing very seriously. I also can't help but mention that, theoretically, it would have been very easy for YouTubers to amplify petty outrage for engagement. But I can't help but wonder if all this could have been avoided. Obviously, the poll itself should have been directly hosted by Mojang when it started getting mainstream attention. To make the voting fair, they could have used an entirely ranked choice system where you pick candidates based on most to least favorite, rather than have multiple rounds of voting. They also probably should have featured more mobs players actually asked for. The 2 biome votes heavily relied on mobs and features suggested on Minecraft's feedback page. But for whatever reason, the developers ended up almost exclusively showcasing their own ideas that often weren't that interesting. I suppose Mojang could have also promised to add whichever mob got second place in a later update, which might quell complaints from other participants. It's not like it'd be that hard to add a crab. Still, others may argue this would just bloat the game even further, but that's besides the point. Would these changes even have made things better? Probably not. It's an understatement to say we've been more polarized in the last few years. Social media algorithms by accident or design have ramped up our tribalistic instincts to 11, and it feels like just about everything is divisive and controversial in some way or another. Populist movements are becoming increasingly vitriolic and hateful, while the establishment is unwilling or incapable. Yikes, let's get back on topic. The mob vote was always going to end up like this, no matter how well Mojang handled it. I can't help but feel the current state of the internet is just unequipped to handle anything related to voting or elections in a remotely appropriate manner. Finally, I'd like to ask, what do you think the mob vote's legacy will be? Will players simply forget about it as time passes on? Perhaps some will feel immense nostalgia for the events held surrounding it. Maybe others will continue to joke about it for years on end. But who knows? Mojang might just take another shot at democracy in Minecraft. Alright, consider checking out this video if you like to watch something a bit more lighthearted. Huge thanks to my patrons, Gobi Bago, Autumn, Kai the Fuchs, and Winged Harmony. Please consider leaving a like or subscribe or comment or blah blah blah. See y'all in the next video.
So this is how liberty dies, with thunderous applause.